Hi, all. Rev Blair here with a little pastoral care note at the top of this episode. We're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein and some things related to child sexual assault and child sexual assault materials. So please check in with yourself, make sure you're in an okay place to listen to this episode, and be aware of who you may be listening around. We want you to be okay. We want you to be healthy and safe and engage in ways that are positive and encouraging for you.
Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter and I am your host. I am a professor of theology at Methodist Theological School in Ohio and the lead pastor of the Loft Faith Community at Westwood United Methodist Church in Los Angeles. If you like the show, please rate, review, and all that good stuff. Definitely subscribe to us on our YouTube if you haven't already done so. Like, leave comments. We engage, we reply, we do all those interesting things. So if you are engaging with us, we are definitely wanting to know what y'all think about what we're doing, the content we're creating, and just what your thoughts are about it. In today's episode, we will be discussing the Epstein files. I have been reluctant to talk about it because I'm like, is this something that we need to talk about? But apparently we do. And joining me today to talk about it is Julia and Reverend Blair. How are y'all doing today?
Still, just keep swimming.
As well as one can be when discussing the end of the world.
We miss you, Wesley. Come back.
We do miss you, Wesley.
I know he's
living it
perpetual
up.
vacate. I know he is. I'm like,
He's real busy. And just like a shout out to Wesley, he doesn't own a car in Los Angeles and he commutes via public transit. And just like the moral fortitude to make that happen is so strong. So I admire
Wesley's
you,
one
Wesley.
of my best friends, and that's like the thing about him is he like walks the walk. It's wild. Like he had a car and he was like, no, I believe that if we want cities to invest in infrastructure and public transportation, then more people need to take it. So I'm selling my car and I'm moving to a different neighborhood and I am being the thing that I say. Be the change. He's being the change he wants to see in the world, which is so brave because it's not me. You know what I mean? Like.
Well, the hard part is like, especially in Los Angeles, like my nephew was here last week who lives in New York, and we took the metro to the soccer game to see LAFC play. Crazy game. And he was like, man, this is so slow. He's like, it's taking a long time. And I was like, yeah, this is not the efficiency of underground rail out here. So but yes, Wesley, we do miss you. Hope you're enjoying all your random vacations,
your travels, your trips.
all over the place.
How fun for you.
And looking forward to having you back here in a few weeks.
As you listen back to this episode while you're probably on a train or a bus. Our shout out is to Wesley today.
Exactly. That's our shout out. So I guess maybe to kind of set the table, I want to talk a little bit about why we decided to have this conversation. Ever since the Epstein stuff really started generating more discourse a few weeks ago, I just didn't think it was necessarily in our wheelhouse. I was like, well, it feels a bit more of the tangential, conspiracy theory stuff that doesn't really resonate with what we do on this podcast with respect to religion and politics. I'm not averse to conspiracy theory stuff, but I was like, this just seems a little bit too far out. But the more it lingers, the more I've been able to pay attention to the religious language around the ways in which people within conservative and conservative Christian spaces are really passionately interested in these files and having them released. And so I think, maybe for those of you who haven't been like me, I was totally like not checked into what was happening with this stuff. Now I understand actually it is important for us to know, because I do think there's a important religious dimension that we're going to talk about and unpack today as to why conservatives and conservative Christians are interested in this, but also like the entanglement with, essentially what we talked about last week when we were talking about the theology of the rapture and how this ties into QAnon, and again, things that I personally was just not really paying attention to. But now I see how and in what ways the role religion played even in January 6th. Like, I honestly did not know that until like when I started doing research for this episode. I'm like, oh, this
Did you
was.
miss the big cross and the like Christian flags they were
Well, I mean,
carrying? It
that's
was
like,
on
well,
TV.
yeah, but like, I mean, that's like saying, I know that's like the Klan. You know, the Klan got a
Yeah.
cross. You know what I'm saying?
Religious
You know, I'm like,
symbolism and theology are not like they're intertwined, but they're not exactly the same. And so just
There's a
because you have
Christian
religious,
flag.
yeah, there is a Christian
yeah,
flag.
it's a
It's
Christian
real
flag.
twisted.
I'm looking it
But
up.
just because you have religious symbolism doesn't mean you actually have developed theology. But I hear what you're saying,
Exactly.
that there is
Yeah.
like some actual intentional developed theology around this.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Because I remember, I mean, many of you hopefully are familiar with that. There's a really famous picture of the Klan, like in a church. I want to say it's in Georgia, where the background says Jesus saves, and there's all these people just standing straight up and down with their Klan regalia, and you're just like, well, this is creepy, you know. So yeah,
yeah.
I there is this definite mix of religion within this kind of social phenomenon, but I didn't realize how much it's wrapped up in eschatological like saviorism. Like I didn't, and it helps me understand honestly why people worship Trump to an extent the way they do. Like I was like, oh, this helps it make more sense to me. And so maybe, hopefully, this episode will do that for those of you who have been like me and just not engaged in that space as well. So
You're such an educator, Dr. Carter, that the listeners get to learn alongside you.
I'm like, hey, this is. I'm just curious. I'm like, I like to know stuff. I like to feel informed. So,
and this is why progressive Christians need to talk about eschatology and soteriology more often, because it frames how we all behave, which is why I study evangelism.
It does. It all comes back to evangelism, doesn't it, Blair?
Every single time.
Every time.
It's the study of the ultimate things, right? It's this, like, what drives us is what we believe is going to happen to us in eternity. Yep. That shapes the way we move in the world today.
And clearly it's shaping the current Republican Party and the current conservative, none of these churches, in ways that are both implicit and explicit. And so to talk about this, we really kind of have to get back to an extent, QAnon. Like there's a way in which we kind of have to go back all the way to the beginnings of what that is and how it ties to the Epstein files. And so I have some notes here that I'm going to kind of go over for a few minutes to kind of, catch, so that we're all on the same page. And then I'll pause so that we can have some discussion before I continue on, so we can make sure that we understand kind of how we got here. So all of this really starts with the way in which QAnon begins to emerge around 2016. And the reason it is important to what's happening with Epstein is because the central focus for the QAnon followers was, they believe in this global elite, basically, that is a group of folks who are engaged in child trafficking, and these people are protected by powerful institutions. And so because of these files, they believe if Epstein has these files, because Epstein ran in circles with very famous people, people who, for conservatives, have historically believed these people were liberals because of his connections and relationships with Donald Trump, with Bill Gates, and other people who were,
media
progressives.
elites.
Yeah, exactly. But he also had relationships with Donald Trump, as we now know, like at other people, right? And so the release or withholding of these files is a big, important part of this conspiracy, quite honestly, because it really it reveals to the extent to which there is such thing as a deep state, which is the thing that Trump has played up for years. Like they have rallied around this idea that there's a deep state, meaning that there are people that are in control of everything in your life that helps you understand why things are as difficult for you as they are. And so some, if not most, of the people in the like MAGA movement believe in the false claim that the United States is secretly controlled by a cabal of elites who are like pedophiles and sex traffickers and also Satanists, I should say. These people are also Satanists. And this baseless, like literally a baseless conspiracy theory, it started on, I think, 4chan, and it's become mainstream. So it started in very obscure places, and it's become deeply mainstream, and it's important, and it is an important part of American political landscape. And in this, ultimately, the foundational belief of many in the QAnon group is that Trump is a heroic figure fighting the elite pedophile ring. Like, Trump is their savior because he is fighting to save children. He is fighting a pedophile ring of sex trafficking, Satanists. This is their deep story. Now, you might say, okay, what do I mean by deep story? So, deep stories are stories that are told over and over. They are reframed and recast to uphold an interpretation of history that one believes to be true, though it may not factually be true. So, what makes a deep story a story is that they function like basic parts of a movie script. They have heroes, villains, they have familiar plots and events that are supposed to follow. What makes them deep is the story has been told and retold many times, right? And it feels true, even though a deep story often is more myth than history. This is where you get into the ways we might talk about some of the nuances that we discussed last week in our portion or our segment on the rapture and rapture theology, and the ways in which you have the books by Hal Lindsey literally become a deep story, right? This is a
Left
story.
behind. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
left
idea that we're
behind.
going to be taken up and left behind. Like, that's a deep story
It's
because it's
more
become embedded in people's psyche as a part of their mythology and their world making.
exactly, like, they can't understand the world outside of that context. It is so deeply embedded in their self-understanding. It's the only way they can make sense of the world. And so therefore that is foundational to their ethics and their actions within the world, right? And so then it makes sense that they do some of the things they do.
Another deep story is the book is White Too Long by Robert P. Jones. There we go. It talks about how the lie of Confederate suppression and like the idea that the war against Northern aggression was a war about states' rights, like that is the whole idea of the Confederacy as this heritage to be like upheld and honored. That's actually also another example of a deep story that has shaped the white Southern psyche for generations.
Can
Yeah.
I do one?
Go ahead, do one.
So you know how we think about like heaven up above and hell down below, but that's like so attached to ancient Zeus, the
Cosmology.
underworld. Like we don't even like, yes, we also think of like hell as like how Dante, we talked about that last week, and Dante's, but like also the idea of like where these places exist, that they actually come from pre-Christianity. They're not Christian ideas. It's not in scripture. It's just a deep story. That's my
I mean,
contribution.
I think the way we talk about women's roles, right? Patriarchy really is a deep story. Like, it's like women are supposed to do this, and this is what they're created for, right? These are all deep stories we've bought into. They're narratives that we have to kind of unsettle and unpack. And I think what I want to suggest here is that the reason why this story is developed is because people are trying to make sense of their world, right? So I don't want to belittle or like shame these people who have this story, because I think what they're ultimately trying to do is to explain why they're suffering. And I think it's easier for them to buy into a conspiracy theory than to actually look at what they feel to be a complicated political narrative, right? It's easy to think that politics is too complicated for them to understand, but I can understand as an employee, I can understand my employer taking advantage of me, or my boss having more power than me. And this story is easier, I think, to relate to and to connect to. And when you tie it to religion, I think that just is like a double whammy. So,
well, and I didn't realize how widespread it was. So, Dr. Carter, you shared this article with us from the BBC, which we'll link in the show notes. And PRRI, the Public Religion Research Institute, which is run by Robert Jones, who I mentioned earlier, who's amazing. They asked in a survey whether or not you agree with these statements. And 1/5 of the Americans they interviewed, so 20%, said they agree that the government, media, and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation. 1/5. 1 out of 5 people said they believe the world is being run by Satan-worshipping pedophiles. That's wild.
Yeah, that is crazy. That's good. And I mean, they didn't even get to the obscure parts because they talk about they think they drink their blood. Like it's real when you get into the new. I read too much. I read too much, as I do. I was like, ooh, this doesn't make any sense. So, yeah. And again, like the part of me that is compassionate towards them is the draw to conspiracy theories is it makes complex things simple. Even though the conspiracy itself sounds insane, it makes what they believe to be complex things simple, rather than actually recognizing like the reason you're suffering economically is because you keep voting for people who actually are messing up your economics. Julia.
So I understand the thing that I struggle with, I don't understand. We know that especially in like evangelical churches, there is actually a problem with sex abuse, like with sexual abuse. And so I understand how people could look at that and be like, well, if we're doing it here, there has to be like a bigger problem. And what's happening to me or what's happening to my daughter, that's just like, that's peanuts compared to what must be going on. But also, I don't understand how it can be a problem on a large scale and not a problem in your own community.
Oh, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So just
Okay,
hold it.
great.
Just
I
hold
love,
up a
I have
little bit.
questions. I always have
I
I
know.
thought we're
questions.
I
gonna come
know.
back around to
I
it.
know. We're gonna because I think that's an important part that Blair is gonna walk us through a little bit. But so let me get to kind of how this happened. So QAnon started again around 2016 with you may remember something called Pizzagate, where there's this falsely claimed that this high-ranking Democrats were operating a child sex trafficking ring out of a Washington D.C. pizzeria. Like literally, that's what happened. And so,
That Hillary Clinton frequented, right? Wasn't that
yep,
part of the story?
exactly, yep. I mean, it got enough traction that somebody with an assault rifle like stormed this restaurant seeking to free the children, and quote unquote free the children or save the children become slogans for a lot of this conspiracy theory. In 2017, that's when Q began to appear, or Q appeared and began posting these cryptic messages on message boards, um, arguing about this or making these baseless claims about a global network of elites involved in controlling institutions like governments, businesses, and the media, and that child trafficking that we talked about before. These are central to their deep story. And so within this QAnon theory, Trump becomes a messianic figure because he comes up as an outsider coming in to drain the swamp. He's going to expose the cabal in a climactic reckoning known as the storm, right? And this is a moment when mass arrest will finally bring justice. And so these people believe that the moment would eventually bring the Great Awakening, which is kind of a reference to obviously the Great Awakening in the 18th and 19th or 18th and 19th centuries. And so this would be kind of an enlightenment, like a moment of mass realization that people would wake up into the truth about the deep state, right? And so again, this is why Trump always talks about deep state and getting people like to actually see what's really happening, and how he says, "I alone can save you." Like all these things that he says is tied to the language of Q. Like the messianic savior narrative is tied to what has been in the background of the kind of the conspiracy theory discourse. So it was all supposed to happen during his first election. And none of these things began to happen. People thought, okay, maybe the storm is going to happen on January 6th after he lost the election, because they were like, this isn't a part of the prophecy, right? We have this, as we talked about last week, right? People are like, this is what's supposed to happen, so we have to make it happen. Otherwise, how do we make sense of our world? And so January 6th comes. It actually doesn't overturn the election. Like obviously we know Joe Biden becomes president. And I mean, there are people who were interviewed in the piece there as the New York Times, where they talked about they were so sick because they thought that the storm was going to happen, that Trump would, and that Trump would remain president. Like they threw up, like they literally vomited. Like people were that upset because they had so invested in this the storm is supposed to be this time of liberation. Like literally, like people, like it was supposed to be like, oh, because these people, the cabal of democratic elites control so much. They control, like, your rent was gonna be free, like your debt was gonna be canceled, all the cures for cancer were going to be released, because all the idea was that this cabal of people were holding back all these things, like COVID. Like the reason that we even had COVID was because of part of these people's lack of response to it. So all of people's problems, the solution to their problems was tied to Donald Trump, like overthrowing this global cabal of sex trafficking, pedophile, Satan worshipers. And so they needed this, in their mind, they needed the storm to happen so that they could actually be free. And so the podcast that Ezra Klein just did with the gentleman from that wrote a book about it, talked about people like bought cars, like people went and did things, like literally bought things because they thought, well, the storm is coming, so it doesn't matter if I can pay for it right now because it's about to be forgiven once this stuff happens. Like that was the mindset that was pervasive in January 6th.
But why didn't they just vote for the people that said that they were going to do those things? So they want socialism. Like they want debt relief and they want like rent control, but they don't vote for the people that's their policy. They vote for the people that is the opposite of their policy. That, like, I'm confused. It doesn't make sense. I know that none of this makes sense.
There's a lack of critical thinking here, where you believe the narrative, and the narrative is tied to Trump, and so there's not actually an investigation or fact checking process where you check what Trump's policies actually are. You just believe Q or Q's acolytes who say these are the things that are going to happen if we elect Donald Trump.
But those things are socialism and communism.
But they don't know that. If you don't label it that, these folks don't know that. And they only know socialism and communism as being tied to Satanist pedophiles. They don't actually know what is socialism. They have not read what is actually a definition of socialism, what is actually a definition of communism. And
wild.
It comes back to also about like this like developmental theory of psychology, right? It's that they're still stuck, that we had an episode about Fowler stages of faith, but like, it's arrested development. So they're still in phase 1 and phase 2 where you're just believing the mythical stories and you're shaping your world based on the mythical stories. And then you are focused on a community of belonging. And so if you're in a community where everybody else believes the mythical story that Q is putting forward, then you don't challenge it because it might push you out of the community. And so they'll believe whatever the mythical story is without challenging it, even if the mythical story does not actually align with the reality of the social structures of our world.
Okay.
And again, this is where you believe in like a kind of a hero, great man theology, if you will. And it literally is almost a man rather than actually like policies. So Julia, I agree. But this has been proven out in polling for decades. When you separate policies, ask people to look at policies, people tend to like Democratic policies. They don't tend to like Democrats. Or they like because they think of it as a person rather than policies. And I think that's the challenge, is Donald Trump as a figure, as a person, resonated with them as their savior, whereas the people who have these other policies don't, because they've been told they're Satan worshiping elites, but also I would argue they haven't actually tried to really connect with these people as full human beings. I think that was the magic of Obama. Regardless of people say, like, Obama could connect with people. That's what he was great at. And I think people struggle to do that across difference. Anyway,
go ahead. It's just occurring to me that people connect with Donald Trump completely differently, though, because they connect with him as a figurehead and not as a person.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Like what he represents and what he says he can do. Because and also, again, if you are, I can understand and empathize with people who, are in the Rust Belt or in the South, and they are really struggling financially. They look at everything changing. They're trying to make sense of why. And they've been told that if, it's these progressive policies that have taken things away from others, and these people that are taking things away from them are bad people. in some way, shape, or form. Now, that bad people thought is, I would argue, a mirroring, which we're going to get to in just a moment. So I'm going to turn it over to Blair. This is the trick. Like when you are trying to accuse someone of something else, like you can become the thing you hate, right? Or you actually you are mirroring what it is happening in your own house. I think that's a part of what we see happening here. But to wrap this stuff up, right, with respect to QAnon. So we have, then Trump loses to Biden. So people are like, this doesn't make any sense. What about the storm? And then they're like, okay, let's change it. So now the storm actually wasn't January 6th. This is a part of a larger plan, because technically Trump is probably still president, and like he is actually shaping things behind the scenes. And they try to reframe the Great Awakening as a spiritual rather than political event, right? But then in 2022, when Trump started campaigning again, he started using the movement symbolism. Like he started on Truth Social, he retweeted like Q affiliated accounts, and he praised QAnon supporters as people who love their country. And that same year, he reposted people, or an image of himself wearing a Q lapel pin overlaid with the words "the storm is coming." And so like he is totally played this up, and basically saying like, this, I alone can save you. And so for these people, because Trump has been playing this up, Epstein is evidence of the cabal. Like Epstein is evidence that this thing actually exists. And so failing to release these files is Trump going not only back on his word of saying this is what I'm coming to do, it's also acknowledging that maybe Trump is now part of the deep state. Like Trump is actually inhibiting things that he said he was going to do. And this is the juxtaposition. This is the challenge that they're with right now, is they have to wrestle with, well, why doesn't he want to do this? What's at stake? Why is he hesitant to do this? And I think this ties into the religious stuff that we're going to talk about now. So Blair, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so there's a great video on TikTok from Emily Joy Allison. She is a Vanderbilt divinity grad and a grad student currently. She did a great summary of this. So I'm just going to kind of summarize her very good summary, but you should go and watch her original video. But essentially she explains that white evangelicals have built up their support of Trump, and they've excused his behavior and the violations of sexual morality and sexual purity because they believed in this bigger goal, right? Of upending the deep state, of overturning the Satan pedophilia ring. And these ideas, these QAnon ideas, have become like mainstream within white evangelicalism and detached from QAnon, such that they're just like general held beliefs now. So basically, if it's revealed that in the Epstein files, it's not just Democrats and Hollywood moguls who are part of this deep state, who have been part of the Epstein files, who've been participating in child sexual trafficking. If Republicans are in there, and especially if Trump himself is in there, then they have to deal with the fact that what they believed is, first, not true, and second, that they put in power that which they claimed to be most deeply morally against, which is strange because that's what progressives have been asking our family members for so long, is like, at least I have, like my conservative Christian family members, like, you know that there are dozens of sexual assault allegations against Trump. Like, we knew that there, and I'm going to post, include in the show notes an article from 2019 that laid out dozens of sexual assault allegations against Trump, including one from a girl as young as 13. Like, this was all publicly available before they voted for him. So what doesn't make sense to me is that they weren't carrying this cognitive dissonance before. Like, but when you describe the concept of the mythic reality or the deep story, the idea that Trump becomes a figurehead and not a person with individual behaviors, that's how they're detaching it, right? Is it that it's worth it to elect Trump, this figurehead, to overcome this broader evil of sexual immorality, including abortion, across the United States, and get the US into a more morally pure position. But basically, they've had to be carrying this cognitive dissonance all along. And I don't know exactly why, but like for some reason, these Epstein files, as sort of the center of the ring of this QAnon ring, it's the thing that's going to break the camel's back. And so folks are going to have to then grapple with the fact that everything they thought they were supporting is actually everything they thought they were fighting against. And that cripples folks.
From where I sit, he's like hung them out to dry, and that's why they're upset. Like this is gaslighting, and he's been gaslighting all of us the whole time. But like the fact that he was like, courting them outwardly, and then now he's like, what are you talking about? That doesn't even exist. You're stupid. Anyone who even thinks that this exists is stupid, and I don't want to have it. Like,
That's what abusers do. I mean, that's literally that's what abusers
it's
do.
so triggering. It's so triggering. And that's why I think they're upset, because that, for those of us lucky women who've experienced this for ourselves, it is like, it really, really messes with your head. And it's wild to watch on like a grand scheme, like a bunch of people being abused like this.
I think you've seen some of the reaction to it because men aren't used to being abused like this, right? So they're like,
not
hey,
you doing me to me.
They're like, wait.
When it's someone treating me how I treat women.
It's interesting because we've been seeing this happen basically since Trump was elected the second time. We've seen first it was farmers when farm subsidies were ended. And that's so funny too, because they're against socialism and communism for thee, but not for me, right? Because I should get my farm subsidies because I work hard, but somebody else who works hard shouldn't get them. I don't like, that's never made sense to me. But we've seen these like this unraveling of the reality that Trump brings is so opposite to what he has claimed for his supporters, and that they also are receiving the negative consequences of electing an oligarchy. And this is just one more piece in that sort of domino effect of folks waking up and realizing that he's a grifter. And as you know, we say on the internet that when you elect the leopards eating faces party, and then you're surprised that the leopard is also eating your face. Like, that's what's happening. And this is one more piece of that.
But it's not like a realization because these people all knew the whole time. It's just there's always been this belief that
I don't know that they did, because remember, Julia, the deep story.
But they never thought it would happen to them specifically. Right. So like you see it happening to all of these other people and you're fine with it. You pray for it, in fact, and you celebrate when it happens to other people, because the entire time that it's happening to other people, your assumption is, but it will never happen to me. And now it's happening to you, which is what we've been saying would happen for years. But we're doing it the hard way.
But it's that which breaks the deep story, which then pushes you from believing in the mythical world into having to challenge the mythical world as a myth. So you're
and being
like
in
people
reality?
are being thrown into
reality,
a new developmental stage that they're not ready for and they don't know what to do with. And so we saw this happen when, we had the child sexual abuse issues in the Catholic Church and had a ton of people leave the Catholic Church, leave their faith. We have seen this happen with the evangelical community in the last couple of years when the Southern Baptist Convention was sued and had to release a private list of pastors they knew had been accused or should have been convicted of sexual assault, but were still operating within the Southern Baptist system, that the convention had kept that. They had that list, but kept it secret. And then after a lawsuit had to release it. And then a ton of people left the Southern Baptist Convention after that. Like, you trust your leaders who tell you the myth, and it forces you to self-reflect on who you have put your trust in and what you've put your trust in, and then have to reconstruct where you go from here. And I'm not going to demonize people who are going through that process, because it's a difficult psychological, emotional, spiritual process. And I'm glad you're with us now. I guess I am very lucky and privileged to have come from a family and a community where I was taught the critical thinking skills to like unlock fake news and mythical stories from a very young age. And I will acknowledge that I shouldn't be as shocked as I am. That is like a marker of my privilege and my disconnect from a lot of this country. and people's everyday lives for me to be so surprised that so many people are trapped in these mythical stories. And I shouldn't
Yeah,
be surprised.
I think that, you know, one of the things that's difficult sometimes for us to, I don't say difficult, but it's not the right word. I guess one of the things I want to say with respect to these kind of beliefs in cabals, right? If you look at what Q created or what was created, it mirrors what we saw happening in these spaces, as you both have pointed out too, right? There's this, they believe there's this child sex trafficking ring. Well, what was the Southern Baptist Church doing other than actually protecting people who were actually abusing folks? What was the Roman Catholic Church doing other than protecting clergy who were actually abusing people, right? What if some of these mega churches have been doing, right? And we can put, I mean, there's, if you just Google like church sex, clergy abuse sex scandal, you will find any number of things. Like this is the chickens coming home to roost, as they say, right? You know, like this has been taking place. The kind of the authoritarian style of leading has allowed people to abuse their power, particularly over the bodies of children and women. And so you are externalizing an issue that is an internal issue. You are externalizing the problem rather than turning inward, right? Because it's easier to say the problem is just out there, right? It's not me though. Like this is what happened to me. Like it's not gonna happen to me. It's easier to say, well, the problem is out there rather than in here in our own house, in my own kitchen, in my own soul, to be in a space that I know enables it. And so for these folks to believe that the Epstein files for them is critical to because it is proof that they aren't as bad as perhaps they subconsciously believe they are. That other people are just as bad too. They're doing it too. It's not just us, and they're even worse. It's crazier over there. But what if it's not? Like, what if it's not? Because sure, there'll be some folks in there, but what if it's not? And that isn't even the issue. How about you stop it from happening from where it's happening in your own place? Like focus on saving your actual literal children, like your literal children. You know, if you look at having worked at a Roman Catholic school and having had to have these meetings where I discuss this with, like, it's terrible. I am sometimes shocked that people decided to stay Catholic because of what the American Catholic Church especially was able to cover up. But if you're talking about a cabal, the Vatican, that's a cabal, man. I'm like, you can't get, I'm like, that is a cabal. Like, you know, from the Medici's to, I mean, this is operated pretty cabal like for a long time. So this is, you know, we shouldn't be surprised that people recreate something that mirrors their own experience. And so ultimately, that's what I take from this is that um, the reason it's so interesting is because it is to an extent a mirroring of what's going on in their own spaces, and it's a way in which it's getting processed, and it's forcing them to no longer say, like, they're not releasing Epstein files makes them think, oh my gosh, this is actually more about us perhaps than it is about them. And that when you have a theology, a deep story that is fundamentally us versus them, this is why you see these things begin to break. And both of you have pointed out the ways in which it has begun to have cracks. And this isn't going to be the thing that breaks Trump. This isn't going to be the thing that eliminates MAGA, but it is fracturing trust. And trust is critical. If you can get these people to mistrust him and mistrust people who are teaching them bad theology, that's an opportunity for us to begin to reach out and teach good theology, right? I'm not saying I need everybody to become progressive. I'm just saying you don't need to be voting for crazy people. You know, that's all I'm saying. Like, you know,
I just
like,
want you to do your own theology.
yeah, there
I
you
just
go.
want you to chat. Like I've talked about it before. It's like bad sermons and vibes. Like I just want you to get past and start to question the bad sermons and vibes. Like please choose your community of faith on more than bad sermons and vibes. Like choose your community of faith based on who can help you grow and deepen your understanding and your ability to learn and question and find meaning and find hope and challenge injustice. Like find people who support your journey and your understanding, not people who force feed you and tell you that if you go against whatever the person on stage is saying, then you don't belong.
I also think you mentioned a few times, Blair, like you should be in communities that are helping you literally develop the fruits of the spirit. And you should see the people in your leaders model that. And when ever since you said that like
Yes.
months ago, I was like, well, that's just that it's so simple. If you don't see that in those people, then that's not a place you should be. If you don't see
Run.
the fruits of the spirit, then you need to run. Like, you know, if they're not and that matters. And don't redefine like gentleness in this violent way, because that's not what it is. Like it's about being gentle, you know? And like there's nothing gentle about some of the people that we have been following, that these politicians are, and some of your religious leaders that have been followed as well. And so I think the answers have been right in front of us. It's a matter of us making the choice to follow it. I feel good about where we are here. Is there anything else I want to say about this, or do you want to move on to begin discussing
I was just
the
gonna say,
reduction of free speech?
well, what speech? I was just gonna say, I do hope that our little podcast, our little corner of the internet, the nasty, dark, twisted internet, I hope that this podcast gives people faith that, like, if they do not see the fruits of the spirit in their leaders and the leaders in their communities, that they can walk away and know that there are places and people where they will be received openly and lovingly, and that they can find belonging. And like, I'm not saying that that's easy. I'm not saying that that's not painful, but that like it's not the only option.
100%. I mean, I think that's the fears that people have. They will leave a community and they won't have a community at all. That's one fear why they won't leave. Or they're afraid to join another community because of the hurt and trauma that they carry. You know, and I think that my hope, as you said, Julie, is that we do give people some hope, some confidence that there are other people out there like you that want to actually be Christian and practice Christianity in a way that's about uplifting others. It's about love. It's about compassion. It's about justice. It's about seeing the image of God in all people. And ultimately, I mean, that's what Christian. That's what no one. I did a TikTok, you know, where I was talking about Christian cringe, and I think like, and it was just funny because I saw this, you know, thing where it's like when someone starts talking about God and the lady makes a funny face, and I'm like, that we've done that terrible job. If people, when we start introducing ourselves, or when our religion comes up or our faith comes up, and people start to cringe, that should make us be introspective. Um, and that to me is where we ought be thinking about all this
And
stuff.
not defensive,
Yeah.
introspective.
Yeah, not defensive. I'm like, what did we do to cause that? You know, not like, oh, why you feel that way? No, introspective. You're exactly right. Not defensive. Because that doesn't solve the problem. And I think this Epstein stuff, this Pizzagate, all this global cabal, it's all a way to distract us from doing inner work, literally doing the inner work of self-reflection. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as someone who's spent time not necessarily in these exact spaces, like I've never been to an Epstein party, like I've never been to a Diddy party, but I have been to these parties, this type of party. The reality is, like, people are right when they try to conceive of what these parties are like. I could tell you, and you wouldn't be able to believe it because it is unimaginable. But also, always Occam's razor. And the reality is, like, there are dangerous, predatory people in all of these places. Like, I've been to parties with former presidents, and like, I've never seen them do anything. And that's like completely honest. And I'm not saying they did or didn't or what, but like, the reality is that there are people in these spaces and in these places and in these like in these worlds, and you would never know what is going on in the room literally right above you, let alone on the other side of the compound. Like, you can't conceive of like how easy it is to keep secrets like this in when you have massive amounts of wealth. That's all I'll say.
And depravity and the ability to assault and manipulate and control women and children at your whim when you have wealth, and wealth is what primarily gives you power, but wealth and social power, it doesn't need to be a system that protects these people. It's just wealth and power. It's the same thing that protects every other wealthy individual, right? And it doesn't need to be a secret sex pedophile ring. It just There just are a lot of really terrible people who never have to suffer the consequences of their actions. And frankly, the oligarchy is what we all need to fight against. The ability to behave with impunity because you
Yes.
have money.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be organized. Like it's just that widespread that
Well, I mean,
sexual assault and violence is happening all the time in every space.
Yes.
And we all need to be a part of it and a part of the solution, and ask ourselves when we've let something slip that contributes to it. And as you said, Dr. Carter, like, not assume it's someone else's problem. It's all of our problem. We all have to protect women and children and vulnerable people.
Well, I mean, this is why I think Scripture, Jesus, and Revelation, as we discussed, this is why they make and talk about wealth so much, because wealth at its core, when it's worshiped and it becomes your God, it enables these kinds of things to happen. And why churches or conservative churches have jumped on this idea of, you know, these politics of the body with respect to sex, and gender and sexuality and other things. um I do understand, because it's easier to talk about that kind of stuff rather than actually talk about the complicated issues of worshiping money. Because to me, like, that is at the foundational problem we get here. That's the reason QAnon can emerge and be sustained is because it's telling you this myth of the salvific myth that Trump is going to come and liberate you from your debts, from oppression, and everything else. And it is a myth that's constructed to get you to focus on maintaining your positions of privilege and power. To Julia's point about why don't they vote this way, because it's trying to vote this way, I mean vote for the Democrats, is because they're trying to get you to look down and punch down, to keep the people below you, rather than to look up and realize, oh wow, the people above me got a gajillion dollars. They took all the money and they're
hoarding it.
And they're hoarding it. But if they get you to focus down, and then you don't take the time to look up and be like, oh wow, I'm fighting these folks for crumbs when they got literally the whole pizza, you know? And so this is the part that I think we have to try to keep in mind about why the investment that people like Trump have in these conspiracy theories. Now, we wanted to wrap up by talking just briefly about free speech and do a little bit of pop culture stuff, which for us, you know, is it being out here in LA, we wanted to at least bring up the targeting of Stephen Colbert and the other late night hosts by Donald Trump. I know I was like, I was surprised, because I don't really watch late night TV anymore. Like, I watch the clips on YouTube and social media and whatnot, but he's hilarious. And I know his show has had the highest ratings of all the shows. And so they're like, oh, we're canceling it because he called out Paramount for essentially paying a $16 million bribe to get rid of this lawsuit that didn't make any sense, so that they could merge with CBS, so the Trump administration would let them merge, right? It's literally like quid pro quo, like illegal. Like, this is not legal in our democracy.
It's bribery,
yeah,
but legally done through the courts and lawyers.
And he named it, and so they fired him. Like, you know, they fired him. The Paramount people fired him. The CBS folks did this really nice statement about what he's done and whatever. But I was like, it's crazy. Like, it was crazy. But I'd love to get y'all thoughts on it too.
And I've always admired Stephen Colbert because he's a brilliant comedian. I think most comedians are smart people who are really keen observers of the world. And so in that way, I feel like this like prophetic connection to comedians, or a lot of comedians. And Colbert has always been very honest, very upfront. He's always tried to do comedy in a way that connects with lots of different kinds of people. And also, he's a committed Catholic. And he's a person who has talked openly about his faith and being a person of faith. And so it's people like Colbert and Jon Stewart, who has fought for 9/11 survivors and first responders. It's folks like that who use their money and power to make the world a better place. That reminds me, it's not that you can't have money and influence. It's what you do with it. And we ought to make the right people famous. And so to see Colbert being cut down like this, to see Jon Stewart defending him, Fallon and Kimmel, like kind of in a separate space, but like, the integrity that Colbert has operated under as sort of like skirting the line between news reporter and comedian for most of his career. I just think he's such an honorable guy, and I don't think we're ever going to find out some like nasty Me Too thing about Stephen Colbert. And so the fact that he's being targeted is, to me, just like a further statement of how deranged and sinful the powers that be are in this moment to cut down a man like that.
I also think in a time of that conservative Christians are trying to convince us that they're all under attack, I really do think there's something in it for me about Stephen Colbert and the way that he moves through the world and like the way that his faith guides him and the way that he shows up based on his faith, his religion, his theology, that he's absolutely being punished for. Like he is here. We actually have like a man that like leads by his faith who is being silenced by the government, which is the thing that they say that they hate, but like they're doing it. Also, like pour one out for the Late Show, generally an American institution for decades.
Right. And all the people who are losing their jobs connected to this, right?
Gone.
We know how that works. These are our colleagues. These are our neighbors. We live here in LA.
We live in LA.
Okay,
like,
excuse me. The Late Show is filmed in New York, but still.
It's the same like, you know what I mean? Like it's the same community. It's the same unions.
I think that, for me, this is one of the lessons from On Tyranny in Timothy Snyder's book is remember professional ethics. And he writes, when political leaders set a negative example, professional commitments to just practice become more important. It is hard to subvert a rule of law, state without lawyers, or to hold show trials without judges. Authoritarians need obedient civil servants, and concentration camp directors seek businessmen interested in cheap labor. Like, he's basically saying you have got to actually do the job that you're hired for, regardless of the political and pressure that's put upon you. And I think one thing about Colbert is he is Catholic, and he's talked about in his interviews. He's really, he's like Catholic. Like
he's like very religious.
Yeah, he's very, very religious. And so, and he talks about how his faith shapes and influences him. If he gets this, I would love to have him on the podcast.
I was saying, Brother Colbert, if this gets back to you, yeah, I got a number of projects I'd love to work with you on.
Like he is, I think, I appreciate what he's doing because he's not doing like, I feel like Harvard is maybe gonna cave. I hope they don't.
It's so upsetting.
And like, these people got billions of dollars and they're unwilling to, they don't. This is the time when you've got to hold the line. Like, you've got to hold the line. And like, if you don't, like, it continues to enable a tyrant. And I don't use that word lightly. Like, I want to be clear. Like, I feel like people call Barack Obama a tyrant. They call Joe Biden a tyrant. But like, you can look at what Trump is doing and see the pattern of other people that are tyrannical, right? And so this is where I think you can push back some conservatives who would say, well, Obama was a tyrant. I'm like, well, let's talk about the people we agree were tyrants, and this is what they did. Now, how is that parallel to anything that Obama did or Biden did versus what Trump is doing, right? Like, it's a pretty, you can walk people through this logically if they're willing to go there. But anyway, this is, I have some concern about free speech in the media, because the only way we're going to get people who don't engage in political discourse to be aware of what's happening in the world is through like memes, clips, social media stuff. And Colbert is one of the voices that could probably slip in under the surface that they might be able to hear, so that they might actually be able to think more critically about the people they're voting for and how it actually shapes their life. Well, that is our episode for today. We want to thank you for joining us for the Progressive Christians Podcast. The Progressive Christians Podcast is a ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you would like to connect with us and be a part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. We want to thank our wonderful audio engineer, AJ, who mixes and edits our show. Again, we want to invite you to please review, rate, and subscribe to our podcast. And we will see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.